All right, can you hear anything now?
Hold on.
It looks like it's pulling it up on the volume settings.
Videos. New channel. Here we go. Let's see. Channel. Yep, got it. Here we go. Perfect. Yep, got it.
Sorry about that. You're good?
That's all right. Not a
I
problem.
got you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
All right, so we got way behind because the university closed for 2 weeks that we were supposed to have class on Tuesday, 2 weeks in a row. So we had one class, and so I'm gonna try and catch up as quickly as I can. So I may not take, or I may not ask a lot of questions, which is very antithetical to the way I teach, which is normally I use the Socratic method where I ask a lot of questions and you respond or you don't. If you respond, you get a duck. I did bring the ducks today in case anybody wants to. Before I forget though, if you want an extra credit opportunity in this class, I will have one on March either 30th or 31st. You can participate as a volunteer for our sales competition. And I will have details if you're interested in that for you as the time approaches. I'll have volunteers doing different things like helping me knock on doors to get people to come out of the role play rooms, collecting judges' scores, things like that. So it will be a significant opportunity to earn bonus points. Generally speaking, in my classes, students have issues at least with the first exam. So it will give you an opportunity to recover from that because the exams tend to be in my classes just harder than they are because I use essays and things like that. So if you're interested in that, see me after class or send me a text or an email and I'll give you the details on what you'll be doing. It'll just be a couple-hour commitment from anybody who wants to do it. Coming to the Law Office Corporate Campus, which is kind of interesting to see. If you've never seen how a sales competition works, it's an opportunity to do that if you're not in the sales program. So it's a good opportunity. So I will have that available as extra credit. So we were talking about the evolution of, let me switch this display so that's not on me. The evolution of IMC and an overview of IMC. And I said this class is one of the fun classes that I teach because this is the part of marketing that everybody thinks of as being marketing. So I'm just going to go back and recap what we did on the first class and talking about IMC within the context of the marketing field. So there's lots of subfields of marketing. The oldest subfield of marketing is probably logistics, which is the part that nobody thinks of as being marketing, but as marketing. IMC is the part that we all think about as being marketing. And it's coming up on the biggest day in advertising this weekend, which is what? The Super Bowl, right? So, people who don't watch football watch the Super Bowl, and people who flip through ads, who zip and zap through ads, actually on this one day a year will watch the ads, right? And that's what we talk about in this class is the integrated marketing communication, and advertising is a huge percentage of that. So many ad agencies have switched over from being just advertising agencies. If you watched Mad Men, which was a very popular television show about 10 years ago, I guess now, that was sort of the golden age of advertising. I know that's a rather old for most of you, like 10 years ago, you were what, in like elementary school or something like that, high school. So you may not have watched Mad Men. It's still in reruns. You can catch it. It's a good show. That's kind of the golden age. And many advertising agencies have become IMC agencies, where it's a broader perspective of what we used to teach. This course used to just be called advertising and promotion. And now we recognize that it's about more than just that, because we have this ability to interface with our consumers in a way, for example, that I'm doing in this class. We are living IMC because I am providing you with multiple ways of engaging with the class. This is integrated marketing communication by using YouTube. So if you missed the class, you can watch the video afterward. You can participate in live chat on YouTube Live. I also monitor my phone for people who don't come to class. So if they have questions, and from time to time, I do get people that text me. So many ad agencies have become IMC agencies, and we've got this sort of broader perspective emerging. So the evolution of IMC, again, The American Association of Advertising Agencies developed a definition of IMC, and they say it's a concept of marketing communication planning that recognizes the added value of a comprehensive plan that evaluates the strategic roles of a variety of communication disciplines. For example, general advertising, direct response, sales promotion, public relations, and combines these disciplines to provide clarity, consistency, and a maximum communication impact. So what this really focuses on in this definition, it's a long definition, and what we really need to focus on is it's a comprehensive plan. What businesses did in the past was you hired an ad agency to take out an ad. You might have engaged in sales promotion by getting people to do couponing and develop those for you. And you had these disparate actors involved in the process, and you may not have been speaking with a clear and consistent voice. And so IMC attempts to unify the voice of the business and make sure that across all of those touch points, what you're doing is you are being consistent and adding value for your customers, constituents, or whatever it is that you serve. So for example, we don't have customers at UCO. Students think they're the customer. It's more complicated than that, but we have constituents, right? The people of the state of Oklahoma are one constituent that we serve by providing educational services to students here. That impacts every citizen's life. The higher education we have in terms of our workforce, what does that mean? That means that we're able to attract more companies that are willing to come to Oklahoma and hire our workers or relocate here. So you're not exactly a customer, but you do pay tuition, so you're a constituent. So it's not just looking at customers, it's also recognizing that marketing has become broader than just this narrow focus on business to business or business to consumer relations, and that it involves, societal impacts as well. Some scholars have argued for an even broader approach or bigger picture approach that involves all of the firm's activities. So marketing as a discipline has attempted to unify, and if there's one thing that you'll take away from all of my courses, is that marketing is the only fully integrated function of the firm. All of the other disciplines that we have in business focus on the internal aspects of the firm for the most part. It's not that they're unimportant, but I will tell you that you can do away with a lot of those functions or not know anything about them and still have a business and still operate successfully in the business to business or business to consumer context. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take, for example, accounting. You can start a business and know nothing about double entry bookkeeping or the GAAP. No, you can do this. You can know absolutely nothing. You can get yourself TurboTax and figure out your taxes. And as long as you make enough money to satisfy your needs and wants, you don't have to know anything about it. In fact, most people don't operate using double entry bookkeeping anymore because you can look at your bank statements online every single day and see where your cash flow is at any given moment in time. So this principles that we have in accounting, you can run a business without knowing any of those. I can go down and start a law practice today. There used to be this guy, and I use this example in all of my classes. So if you've heard this example in one of my classes before, I apologize, but I tell students I only have so many stories. And so if you have to hear them 2 or 3 times, redundancy is good. So when I was a young lawyer practicing law, there used to be this guy in Oklahoma County down at the courthouse who'd sit there at the shoe shine booth. And at that point in time, there were still these things that you found in public buildings called payphones. You all have never seen these. There used to be a movie by Whoopi Goldberg, a very old movie now, called Phone Booth. And people used to use these. Like, they didn't have this device that kept them in constant communication. And we inappropriately call this device a cell phone. And we almost never talk on it, ever. But people didn't used to have these. Phones were something that were attached to a landline, and you had to know the number you were calling. How many of you know numbers? It was amazing when I was a kid growing up how many numbers we stored in our little brains because we didn't have phone books on our phones. You had to either look it up or know it. And so you knew all of your friends' numbers, you knew the businesses that you frequented, their numbers, all of these things. So there was this guy in Oklahoma County, he was a lawyer. He would sit down at the shoe shine booth every day. He had a reserved spot. He paid the shoe shine guy to reserve him a spot. It was right next to the phone, the pay phone. That was his communication with his clients. If his clients wanted to get a hold of him, they called the pay phone at the Oklahoma County Courthouse. He handled mostly criminal defense work, so they didn't really call him because they were in jail, and you only get one phone call, and then your lawyer comes to see you right before court every time. But that was his thing. I would guarantee you he didn't know much about double entry bookkeeping or anything like that. He knew that, he could pay his bills, and he made money by, taking on public defender. That's the way it used to be. The court would just appoint people to represent people, and they would pay you. So you don't need to know anything about accounting. I ask my students this, most of you should have had a finance class. What's the most fundamental question that you have when you're starting a business from a finance perspective? And my students never get this. And I'm like, what are they teaching you in your finance classes? This should come tripping off your tongue. Just like after you've had one of my courses, the response, marketing is the only fully integrated function of the firm, should come tripping off your tongue. When I ask you about finance, if you've had a finance course, if there's one thing that you should know about starting a business with regard to finance, it's what? Anybody know? No, nobody ever gets this. What's the capital structure of your business going to look like? That's the first thing that now you can answer this question without knowing what capital structure is. There's two ways. It's the most important decision in terms of finance that you're going to make. And most people do it with equity, right? They save money and they start a business. Or the other way you can do it is with debt. You can go out and get a bank loan. So there's two ways you can structure the capital of your business. It's either through equity, that's your own or selling stocks, or through debt, right? You don't have to know anything to start a business about capital finance, really. If you want to start, for example, a personal services business, you don't have to know anything about capital structure. From you can just start your little business where you run errands or whatever for people. People do this all the time. You can start your little law practice if you're a lawyer without knowing much about capital structure, right? So these other functions of the firm largely look at the internal world or the internal aspects of the firm, whereas marketing looks at the broader. And so IMC, as a subfield of marketing, is naturally going to say, let's take a bigger approach so that we involve all of the firm's activities, so that the accounting people understand why we need the numbers that we need to budget for these things, like advertising and promotion and public relations and things like that. And then, of course, there's this focus on consistency. A focus on consistency. So a contemporary perspective of IMC. Don Schultz at Northwestern University's definition is integrated marketing communication is a strategic business process used to plan, develop, execute, and evaluate coordinated, measurable, persuasive brand communication programs over time with consumers, customers, prospects, employees, associates, and other targeted relevant external and internal audiences. The goal is to generate both short-term financial returns and build long-term brand and shareholder value. So what does all of this say? Well, it's pretty much just what I've been talking about. It's about a focus on developing programs that are coordinated, that speak with one voice, that will provide us with measurable returns, right? That's basically what this says. Now, this can be difficult. When you take out an ad, you don't necessarily know if the ads become successful or not. It's hard to tell. There's not necessarily a direct one-for-one. It's getting easier with modern metrics and integrated marketing communication, because one of the things that we can look at is if you take out an ad, for example, with a provider like Google who places ads in places that your consumers are likely to see them. How can you measure that? Well, you can measure it through click-throughs. That's one way of measuring it. And then how many of those click-throughs are converted to sales? So it's becoming easier and easier, but it's still not a perfect one-for-one. But we are getting better at this. We are able to track these things more and more. Whereas in the past, you took out an ad and you could sort of assume it was successful if you saw an increase in sales, but there may be a delay in that, depending on what kind of advertisement it was, or depending on what type of business you had, because sometimes it takes people a long time to figure out that they need your product or service, or maybe they don't need it at the moment, but they remember an ad, that they saw in a doctor's office in a magazine, which nobody does that anymore either. I'm dating myself once again, because when I used to go to the doctor's offices would have all these magazines out and people would sort of thumb through the magazines. Nobody does that anymore because you have this device, which you sit there and you play. I don't know, what's the most popular, free game that you can get on your phone right now? Was Angry Birds I used to say.
Super popular one right now.
Which one?
Chess.
Chess, just playing chess.
Yeah.
Or another one is that a lot of people play is solitaire on their phone. There's all kinds of solitaire games for your phone. What else? Spades. People play spades on their phone. Those are kind of old-fashioned games, but there are more sophisticated ones that you can play. They try to capture your attention, and then of course they have ads along with those, and you get all of that content for free. So the rationale for IMC, why do we need IMC rather than just having, again, an advertising agency, or then going to a sales promotion agency, or doing this internally and then using ad hoc stuff as we need it? Well, we need to avoid duplication. Duplication costs money. So if we are speaking with one voice and we can get this all at one stop from an IMC firm, we're avoiding duplication of effort, right? Or if we can do this internally, we can take advantage of, and I hate this word, but it's one that's very popular in business, synergy among promotional tools. What does synergy mean? It's kind of a made up term, but what it means is basically that the sum is greater than the parts, right? If you add these things together, they are more effective than if you just sort of do them ad hoc and in isolation. So we want to increase efficiency. The computer has allowed us to do that in many ways. Increase effectiveness. Now, these are not the same, and this is one of the things that I think students need to really focus on. There is a difference between efficiency and effectiveness. What is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? What's the most efficient form? I used to be a political scientist. I didn't start out as a marketer. What do you suppose is the most efficient form of governance in the world? What kinds of governments are there in the world out there? There's democracy. That's what we think we have. We don't have a democracy. Trust me. You have a monarchy, right? Which is ruled by one person, right? You could have a democracy, which is ruled by a lot of people. Or you can have what? One, few, many. That's what Aristotle says, right? He says there's three types of governments. There's government of one, government of few, government of one, government of a few, government of many. Of these types, one, few, and many, he says there's good and bad. But let's just focus on efficiency. What's the most efficient form of these governments? One, few, or many?
Few.
No.
One.
One is the most efficient form of governance. Why is one the most efficient form of governance? Only one person. If I'm the king or the dictator and I say the law is this, and I have my minions execute that law, if I say it at 10 o'clock and by 11 o'clock, so as it's written, so shall it be done. That's very efficient, isn't it? Maybe not the most effective. North Korea, for example, has a government of one person, basically. There are other people that have to carry out the functions, but there's one guy for the most part. It's a cult of personality. It's horribly efficient. Most of us would say it's not terribly effective. And how can we measure that? Well, there's objective measures of the effectiveness. Lots of people are starving. lots of people are probably unhappy, right? So what's an effective government? Well, an effective government is one that implements policies well. Now, of these three forms, which is probably the best for being effective?
Mini?
Huh?
Mini?
No,
No?
probably not. No, like many people, like there's lots of age-old adages, like too many cooks ruin the soup, right? It's probably a few. Aristotle says that. Aristotle says that probably the best form of government is a few. If you have a government of one, it can devolve into a what he calls a bad government, a tyranny very quickly. But if you have a few people, you're going to get efficient decision making, but you're not going to devolve into tyranny, right? This is my analogy to political science. So you're going to maximize your ROI by using IMC rather than using these sort of disparate approaches to, and what I mean by disparate is individualized ad hoc approaches, one by one, like, oh, you know, we noticed that sales are down this quarter. Let's run a sales promotion. Go contact, you know, the promotion agency that's going to put ads in the Daily Oklahoman, or go contact Google and run a coupon, an online coupon thing, right? So if we can integrate these things, we can make them more efficient. And we can maximize our return on investment. So what is the promotional mix? Well, we're going to have advertising, direct marketing, so advertising, broad message appeal using mass media, things like television and now the internet. Direct marketing, we can use direct marketing in the internet. We can micro target populations through direct marketing. So these are not necessarily all just one or the other. They can be combinations of the two. Digital or internet marketing, sales promotion. We're seeing a lot of sales promotion go digital. What's an example of sales promotion that's digital? Anybody know? It's kind of fallen out of fashion, but it was a digital sales promotion. So you've got a combination of these two. Anybody think of the group that did this? In fact, I just used the name of it in part of my just now. It was called Groupon. How many of you have heard of Groupon? One of you has heard of Groupon. That's digital sales promotion, public relations, and personal selling. All of these things have advantages and disadvantages, and we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of all of them as we go throughout the course of the semester. So, contact or touch points that we have with our audience. This is the model. We've got broadcast media, TV, radio, print, public relations, digital, direct. And hopefully what we're getting through these, and we're getting better as marketing and integrated marketing communication evolves, is we're getting better at monitoring sources of feedback on each of these. Word of mouth, point of purchase displays, personal selling, out of home media, things like that. And if you have questions, please interrupt me. I'm just trying to get through this so that we can kind of get caught up, hopefully, before the end of the semester. So, because you're going to have to put together an IMC plan, and I'll talk a little bit about that now. We'll talk more about it throughout the semester. The IMC plan that you'll develop for the end of the semester, you're going to choose a business. I'm going to let you do this as individuals because everybody hates group work. If you want to do it as a group, you can come and see me and we'll talk about that, but most people hate that. There are two ways you can go about this. You can choose a local business that you maybe know something about. The advantages of doing that are that you can find out lots of rich information from them, or you can choose like a national business where you're going to be able to get lots of information from the public reports of that business when you develop like a budget for the process and things like that. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. So the IMC planning process begins with developing or reviewing your marketing plan. If you're a new business, you're going to develop. You're going to start with, how am I going to get people to know about my business? So developing a marketing plan. Now, I'm going to tell you that the vast majority of businesses don't go through this kind of formal stage process. And that's one of the reasons that over 50% of businesses fail within the first year or so. 75% fail within the first 5 years because they don't think about this. It's like, oh, I have this passion for doing this little thing, and I'm going to go out and start a business doing that. Which, by the way, you probably shouldn't follow your passion. Micro talks about this. Anybody know who Micro is? Nobody knows who Micro is. Who's Micro?
From Dirty Jobs.
Dirty Jobs, right? So they asked him, what did you learn about all of this stuff from the Dirty Jobs series that he did? And he's like, I learned that most of the people who did these dirty jobs, who started these companies, were multimillionaires. None of them followed their passion. They looked at where there was a need and they went there. The guy, for example, who owned a company that rebuilt and serviced septic tanks. This is like one of the most disgusting jobs on the planet. But he saw a need. Nobody wakes up, I think, on Monday morning and says, you know, I just yearn to refurbish septic tanks. Like that's just, I mean, it just doesn't, like, you know, nobody yearns to do this. But he saw a need and he became a millionaire doing this. So lots of people, you know, don't go through these formal processes, which is why their businesses fail, because they wake up one morning, they're retired, let's say, or, you know, they've reached a point in their life and they think, well, I can start my own business. They have no idea. One of the ones that's become popular currently that I see lots of people doing, and I used to go around the room and ask my students, why did you take my class? And they'd say, well, I kind of want to start my, you know, even if they weren't in marketing, there would be like people from other disciplines that would take my marketing class. And they're like, I want to be an entrepreneur someday. I want to start my own business. And when I first came back to UCO, the first few years I was back. So I think I told you all I started out not as a marketing professor. I actually started out as the associate general counsel and then a professor of legal studies or political science. I'd ask people in my principles of marketing class, why did you take this class? Well, I want to start a business. Well, what kind of business do you want to start? I want to start a cupcake shop. These were very popular about 15 years ago. There were all kinds of cupcake shops that were popping up. There were people that were buying double-decker buses and going around and having cupcake parties. And I thought, you know, how many cupcake shops can we support in the Oklahoma City area? And it turns out not many, because they've all gone broke at this point, for the most part. I think there's still one down on 23rd Street called Cuppies and Joe. But, you know, like I have this passion to start a cupcake shop. Well, you know, I'm just going to go and I'm going to ride around in my double-decker bus that's painted pink, which was Sarah Cupcakes, I think, did that. And, you know, sell cupcakes at fairs and stuff like that. They've all gone out. So like this food truck phenomenon has started. And people have started doing food trucks. This happened to me sort of in a way that was very low risk. I have this lot in downtown Guthrie, and these people approached me about putting on a snow cone stand. And I said, sure, why not? I'll lease the lot to you. And they put on their snow cone stand. And I thought, geez, I am in the wrong business, because they were charging at that point in time, and this was the early 90s. I had just graduated from high school and I owned this lot. I had inherited it, and they put this little the snow cone stand. And I thought, I'm in the wrong business, because in the early 90s, people were paying $3 for a snow. This is not the old fashioned snow cones of my childhood, which were awful because they were chunked ice and they didn't hold the flavor. All the flavor sunk down to the bottom of the snow cone. This was like the most wonderful thing. This was called shaved or Hawaiian ice. So it makes a very fine powder out of these big blocks of ice, and then you add flavoring. And it actually stays kind of consistent all the way through until the very end, when it gets really sweet, because of the way that they were shaving the ice rather than just, you know, having these chunks of ice. So I thought, you know, I'm in the wrong business. This is the 90s. They're selling this snow cone for $3, and they've got all of, I priced it out. I did a cost accounting sort of analysis, like, of what this is costing. Well, the water was almost virtually free, because they were using water from another business I had. They were just borrowing water because they weren't using hundreds of gallons of water to make these blocks of ice. So they were getting the water for free. They had some cost in the syrup, which probably was 2 or 3 cents per snow cone. And they had the cup, which was maybe another 2 or 3 cents at that point in time. So this is like huge profit margins, right? But then you start thinking about how many snow cones, like let's say you want to make, at that point in time, a good salary was $30,000 a year. People thought if you could make $30,000 a year, that was a really good salary. How many snow cones do you have to sell at $3 a piece to make $30,000 a year? It's pretty easy math, right? What is it? 10,000, right? And that's not actually, because they were having to pay lot rent, and you have to figure your time is worth, but they were running it themselves. It was this husband and wife team. Well, that's a lot. When are snow cones attractive to people to buy? You don't sell snow cones in December. I got news for you. Nobody's buying. So when are they open? Yeah, they're open basically in the spring, starting around spring break time through, about mid-September. And after that, nobody wants a snow cone. So you got to make this money in this very short period of time. And that's a whole lot of snow cones to have to sell. 10,000 snow cones, right? Plus there's 2 of them. If you want to make $30,000 each, that's $60,000. Now you're looking at, double the amount of snow cones to do this. So develop or review the marketing plan, an analysis of your promotional program, do an analysis of your communication process. How are you reaching your customers? You have to have a budget. Running ads, even if you're just going to take out online ads, this costs money. Then you develop the IMC program, implement it, and then monitor it. Look for feedback, see how well it's doing, and make adjustments as necessary. Any questions about sort of an overview of IMC? All right, well, we're going to move on to my favorite topic in the entire course, and I'm going to try and get through it today, which is just awful, and that's ethics. And this is the focus of my research, is on the intersection of ethics and marketing. And the reason I chose this focus for my research is I didn't start out as a marketer. My undergraduate and my master's degrees were in political science. I have a Juris Doctorate from Oklahoma City University. So I was really not all that interested in marketing when I started. What I was interested in was when I wanted to come back to academia from being out in the corporate world, I was interested in knowing that if I got this degree, I'd get a job. At the time that I decided to go into a PhD program, there were about 12 jobs for every applicant who had a PhD in marketing that was graduating. Let me say that, not 12 applicants for every job. There were 12 jobs for every applicant that was graduating with a PhD in marketing. The numbers have only gotten more favorable for marketing PhDs. And that's because not a lot of people go and get a PhD in marketing. And at the time that I went into the PhD program, the average starting salary for a marketer was about $120,000 a year. So this is a pretty good gig if you want to make over 6 figures a year and not necessarily work real hard. Because even if you said we work 5 days a week, which we don't, most of us, how many months out of the year do you work? Well, in reality, they say we work 9, but we don't, because we get spring break off. We get 2 weeks at Christmas off, right? You get all of the holidays off. So it's, it's a pretty good job. Your contract is a 9-month contract, which means you get summers off. And during that 9 months, you get 3 weeks at least off or more. We actually get about 4 weeks off at Christmas most years. So that's why I became a marketer. So I was interested in sort of the liberal arts aspect of marketing, and that meant that I was naturally drawn to ethics as sort of a topic choice for my dissertation. So I like to talk about ethics. It's my focus of my research, and it's the area that I like the most and the one that students hate the most, because there are more questions, unlike other aspects of IMC where I can say, this is the textbook answer to this problem. Like this business is struggling. why are they struggling, we can go in and it's, oh, you decided that you wanted to sell Cupid dolls without doing a marketing analysis of whether or not anybody else wanted a Cupid doll. This is the one where there are more questions than there are answers usually. But it's the one that I like the most because I like to think about these things. So I'm going to ask you briefly, since last time I ran over, and I know I'm going to be really short on time. What is justice and what does it have to do with marketing? So what do you think justice is? Let's just get a few ideas. What is justice?
Like just behavior.
Just behavior in terms of what? How do we determine whether or not something's a just behavior?
By the law.
Okay, the desserts theory. That's a big one. That's called the desserts theory of justice. You're going to get your just desserts. We're going to give you what you want. This is sort of goes along with the biblical admonition, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? So we have the desserts theory of justice. That's a hard one to dispense with, by the way. What are some other ideas about justice?
I always feel like the right thing to do, or like,
Okay, but how do you determine what the right thing to do is? How are we going to do this?
like by the law.
Okay, so we can look at the law. That's another one. That's another possibility. The law. The law is important. Got to follow the law, or you go to jail, or there may be consequences. What are some other ideas about justice? Anybody? Nobody else has an idea? What about something like equality? How's that for an idea? Now, when we talk about equality, what do we mean? Equality of results or equality of opportunity? They're two different things. Equality of results would be everybody gets the same thing. If I have a plate of cookies and I bring them in, and you were taught this as a child when you had, when you brought stuff, how many of you, your parents on your birthday brought cupcakes to your class for everybody? And you were taught that sharing is caring, and that if you're going to bring cupcakes, you can't just go for the cool kids. You have to bring cupcakes for what? For everyone, right? Everyone gets a cupcake. So let's apply that to this classroom. Everyone gets an F. That's equality of results. Is that what you want? No? Why not?
Because some people might work harder than other people.
Oh, so there's some idea that has to do with your effort, right? And working hard. Okay. So we talk about equality of opportunity then. Everyone has the same opportunity. You get the same opportunity to sit here and listen to me, whether or not you're a male or a female, whether or not you are, born in this country or you came here as a student. Everyone gets the same opportunity. We don't necessarily have the same results. We think that has something to do with justice. These questions are really hard to answer. And when I ask about justice, I've had students in my evaluation say, he thinks that justice has anything to do with marketing. It doesn't. Yeah, it does. That's just the wrong a priori. I'm going to tell you that's just when we talk about justice and when philosophers talk about justice, they're not talking about the law, the criminal justice system. That's what this one student kept writing. And he keeps talking about justice. That has nothing to do, crime has nothing to do with marketing. Actually, it has marketing has a lot to do with crime. I mean, lots of criminal activities involve marketing, right? I mean, the drug trade is a marketing activity, an illicit marketing activity, but, so I was like, I guess I didn't reach this one, but when philosophers talk about justice, what they're talking about is this idea of the good. What is the good? So philosophy attempts to answer three great questions. The question of knowledge, what is it I can know? The question of conduct, how should I behave, and the question of governance. And these three interplay. The question of conduct is a question of justice. How should I behave? If my client pays me for a service, the just thing to do in many instances is to give them the quality product that they paid for, right? Not try to cheat them. That's an idea of justice, right? So justice has a lot to do with marketing. What is it I can know and how can I know it? How should I behave and how should we govern ourselves? And governance doesn't just apply to government. When we talk about corporations, we talk about corporate governance. Corporations operate with rules. If you are a corporation, you have to be formed under a state. You know, the state gives you a corporate license. And that's corporate governance. So why should we study philosophy? Well, if you study marketing and you get the highest degree in marketing available, that's the PhD. What does PhD stand for? Doctor of Philosophy. Why is it a Doctor of Philosophy? And you won't take any philosophy courses in marketing PhDs for the most part. What you will, but it involves this question of knowledge. What is it I can know about this discipline and how can I know it? It turns out that this may be harder than we think about, and philosophy as an activity allows us as marketers to really think about. For example, in integrated marketing communication, what is it that we think we know we're saying to our consumers? Let's take a very simple example. What is this thing that I'm leaning on here? Is it really a table? Which is it?
Table? I think it's
A minute ago you said a desk, right? Why is it a table and not a desk? You've equivocated. Now, why is it a table? And then you went back to your original answer that it's a table. What is it? Is it a table or is it a desk?
table.
It's a table. Okay, you've settled on table. Why is it a table? I think your second answer was more correct.
This?
I think it's a desk.
I think
Yeah.
it's a desk because that's how it's being used.
That's how it's being used, right? We're using it as a desk. You're not using, tables are things that you eat on, right? Right? It's a desk. So now what is it? It's a chair. You see how this works? If we can't even agree on what this is, how on earth are we going to know that when we tell our customers that we operate our business on a platform that allows you to have access to our services on any electronic medium now known and deliverable via the World Wide Web onto a portable device? I mean, if we can't even decide what this is, you could say this is a platform. If I stand on it and start dancing, is it a platform? Well, when we talk about platforms in terms of computer world, what are we talking about? We're not talking about something that you stand on and tap dance. We're talking about what? What's a platform?
Like social media wise?
Well, social media could be, I mean, any computer platform, what is it? We're basically talking about, if we use the word platform with regard to computers, basically, and I'm not a computer guy, so I may have the wrong answer here, but a platform generally is an OS, right? It's what supports the functions that you want to do. At least that's what I think it is, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. So philosophy as an activity in marketing allows us to think about these things. What is it that we can know? How can we know it? What should we be doing as businesses? Should we be selling, like selling anything that you want, marketing or advertising anything that you want? And then what kind of governance should we have? What kind of structure should we have in our business? What kind of structure should we have as a society? Other countries, for example, China and North Korea don't allow certain types of social media products into their environment. It's become very controversial. There is now two that I know of. There are two young female North Koreans who have YouTube channels. And they post on YouTube. And everybody knows outside of North Korea, first of all, most people in North Korea have no idea what YouTube is. But these two young girls have got a YouTube channel. Now, why is it that they have a YouTube channel? Well, the North Koreans are trying to, at least according to what the pundits say, influence outside forces with regard to their perception of the North Korean regime. And so these two girls that have these YouTube channels are going to water parks and amusement parks in North Korea.
In North Korea.
Apparently. Now, the issue is that who gets to go to the water park, right? Like it's very few people have access to this water park. So they're trying to influence things, and most people don't even have that. So what kind of governance should we have, right? How do we know what's a good form of governance? So there are some challenges to doing this, and these challenges are attractive to business people particularly. And we find business people making these arguments about philosophical ethics and its application in marketing and relying on what we call invalid theories. So for a test, what you need to know is that there are valid theories and that there are invalid theories of ethics in marketing and in IMC. So an invalid theory is one in which you need to know for an exam. Is an invalid theory is one that allows for exceptionalism, is not based on reason, and therefore, because of 1 and 2, is not universal. Now, when we talk about this, is an interesting aspect of this. When we talk about valid and invalid, we're not talking about true or false. We're talking about the structure of argumentation that you make. True and false deal with whether or not something has a basis in reality. Valid or invalid deal with the structure of argumentation. And the problem with invalid theories, what do I mean by it allows for exceptions? Invalid theories allow people or groups to say, and this is the one that most businesses rely on, is this group think mentality. It allows for people to say, I am special, I am unique, I am above the rule. That's called subjectivism. Or for us to say, my group is special, my group is unique, my group is above the rules. That's cultural relativism. Because there are exceptions, we can't make it universally applicable. It only can apply to, me or the in group, my in group. And it's not based on reason, it's based on emotion. When you make these kinds of arguments, you're basically saying that's an emotional argument. I am special. My group is special. So what are the valid theories? Well, the valid theories are the opposite of these. So for valid, one, they allow no exceptions. Two, they're based on reason, based on logic. And three, because of 1 and 2, you can apply these rules in all places at all times and to all people. Now, the third challenge to philosophical ethics in marketing is what's called psychological egoism. This one doesn't seem true, but is actually the more difficult of them to dispense with. What psychological egoism says is that either as a result of nature or nurture, we react in very predictable ways that are A, not rational, B, highly emotive, and C, beyond our control. Now, there's a guy who's a marketer and an advertiser who's written a book about this. His name is Martin Lindstrom, and the book is Biology, and it's not Biology, which is the study of living organisms. His book is Buyllogy, biology, as in why we buy things. And he says that as marketers who practice integrated marketing communication, we're very good at getting people to buy things that maybe they shouldn't be buying. Now, why is this? Well, it's because of this thing called psychological egoism. He argues that, for example, and this is where marketing becomes a hard science. If we had enough time, if we hadn't had 2 classes taken away from us, I would have talked a lot about this. Is marketing an art or a science? Is integrated marketing communication an art or a science? And I'm just going to give you the answer. The answer is it's both. We can study consumers from a scientific perspective, and we can figure out what they want and what they need and how we can best provide that to them. But it's also an art. The way we go about, once we figure this out, the way we go about persuading them is an art. Although, is it? Maybe it's becoming more and more predictable. And Lindstrom talks about this in Biology. So one of the things that we can study is we can put people under machines that look at their brain waves. These are called fMRI machines. And we actually had one of these at New Mexico State when I was going through the doctoral program. And there were some very cutting edge people in my doctoral program that were using this. It was purchased, I believe, between the College of Business and the Department of Psychology at NMSU to do consumer behavior studies. Now, what these studies suggest is, for example, and Lindstrom talks about this in his book, is that we think that we are discouraging people from doing something. And really what we're doing is, because we don't understand what's going on in their little brain, we're having the opposite impact of what we would intend. And so we need to think about this, because people they really don't have free will. That's what psychological egoism says. There's no such thing as free will. Now, this doesn't seem right to you because you think you have free will. But Lindstrom would say, no, you don't. You really don't have free will. And how do we measure this? Well, one of the things that he looks for in the study is, we had all these ads at the time he was writing the book, all of these public service announcement ads against smoking were coming out as a result of the tobacco settlement. So the states banded together and they sued Big Tobacco because they said, for years you have promoted a product which has caused the deaths of millions of people, and it has cost the states money. Because oftentimes these people don't have insurance, and as they're dying, they are relying on Medicaid. And you've cost us a lot of money. So as part of this, they use the money, and in Oklahoma, it's called TSET, to engage in public relations advertising campaigns to get people to not smoke. And you all have probably seen these ads. There's a guy in a wheelchair. They start out with, like the tobacco companies tell you that all the cool kids smoke and that it'll make you attractive and sexy. And what would you do if you knew? And then they cut away to this guy who is grayed out. He's lost all of his hair. He's lost a lot of his teeth. He's sitting in a wheelchair. He's lost part of a leg. You would end up like me. And when they show that ad to smokers, the smokers say, I'm horrified and I want to quit smoking. But what they're really doing is they're jonesing for a cigarette. The smokers are sitting there thinking, I can't wait to get outside and smoke the cigarette. And the way they prove this, or they think they prove this, is by looking at the brain activity in the fMRI, and the part of the brain that is triggering pleasure is activated as they're showing these ads to these people. So they're saying, that's horrible. I don't want to do that. Now, my argument against Lindstrom, and why I think this is not necessarily true, and his claim, which is based on psychological egoism, is two things. First of all, one is, we're not trying to stop the person who's already a committed smoker. That's not who we're trying to reach, really, with these ads. We're really trying to reach the consumer who hasn't started smoking yet. And you didn't study them, so you have no idea what impact it's having on their brain, right? You studied only the smoker, and as they're seeing puffs of smoke go up, they're thinking, I can't wait to get outside and light up a cigarette. That's not who that ad is directed at. That ad is directed at young children to scare them from ever starting smoking. Now, whether or not it's effective, I don't know. Probably not. Because smoking, by the way, is decreasing among every age group except one. What age group is that? Yours and younger. And I say this as somebody who in the past was a committed smoker. It was one of the hardest things I ever did was to quit smoking. It is enormously difficult to quit smoking. I started in law school. Law school was enormously stressful. After the first set of exams, you only have one exam in law school in every class. You only have one exam. And after the first set of exams, those exams in every class last 4 hours, and you write for 4 hours. If you are not writing for 4 hours, you are failing those exams. This is not multiple guess. It's essay exams, and you are failing if you're not writing. And to a person, after that first set of exams, all of my colleagues went out. We had this little girl who she came from rural Oklahoma. She was a Southern Baptist minister's daughter. And after that first set of exams, she had never had a drink and she'd never had a cigarette, and she had both on the last night after exams. I mean, we all went out to a bar, and I look over and she's smoking and drinking. It's increasing among your age group, and it's hard. It's hard to give it up. Trust me, haven't smoked for 20 years now, but it was hard. The other problem with psychological egoism is that although we can look at what's happening, what part of the brain is functioning when people are shown these ads, we don't really know what they're thinking. We can say, yeah, that's the pleasure part of the brain, but we don't really know what they're thinking, what their thoughts are. And to try and predict on that is very, very difficult to do. But psychological egoism is attractive because if you think about this, it doesn't seem intuitively appealing, but when you think about it harder, it is more and more appealing. And I'll end with this because I'm almost out of time. Can you will yourself to not want something? All of my students every semester say, yes, I can, but a psychological egoist would say, no, you only want something more. So for example, you see a pair of shoes. I like shoes. These are Allen Edmonds shoes, right? I have like 12 pair of Allen Edmonds shoes. These are still handmade shoes, made in the United States, and I think they're beautiful. And I wanted those shoes. Could I have willed myself to not want those shoes? And people would say, well, if you didn't buy the shoes, that's what you did. No, I didn't will myself to not want the shoes. I just wanted something else more than the shoes. I wanted the money in the bank, right? Or maybe I wanted the Rolex that's on my wrist more than I wanted the shoes. But I didn't will myself to want that either. I'll leave you with that, and we will finish this next time and move on. I will send out kind of a modified schedule since we got behind, since we didn't talk about all of this stuff. So I will send that out hopefully today or tomorrow to kind of give you, based on where we got to today, where I think we can, when we can get caught up and when things will be due. All right, sound good? Thanks for coming. Have a good morning.